Hello and welcome to my Mars Mantra podcast. Today we have a special guest from Tonga. Many of you might not know where Tonga is. I also had to look online to be clear where it is. So, Tonga is a Pacific island, just a bit above New Zealand. I'm sure you know where New Zealand is. So, it's a Pacific island and it's a beautiful tropical island. And Jen is originally from England, but she's now living in the Pacifics for many years. And I met Jen virtually today, visually for the first time, but we know each other for 10 years. So, how are you, Jen?
Hi, Rumana. I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to see you virtually, finally, after a long time.
Yes, and what time is it in Tonga now?
Oh, we're going close to 10 p.m., but
Mm,
the fun never stops. So keep going, especially when I've got family in England. So used to it.
lovely. Yes, we are 12 hours ahead of you, so it's
Yeah.
10 in the morning in the UK. So, yeah, let
Yeah.
me introduce you to Jen, how I met her. But before that, I'd like to remind you what MAR stands for. MAR stands for Motivation, Action, Reflections, and Sustainability. Hence, it's called My Mars Mantra podcast. And I want to bring in people like Jen and others who I met throughout my career, and also people who inspire me, who I haven't met, to talk about their stories, how they got inspired to work in disasters and development. So, Jen, that would be your first question. I met you in 2020, 2014, maybe 10 years
Yeah.
ago,
Yeah.
I think around 10 years ago. And you were just planning to start career in disasters and development. So tell me more. How did it start before that?
Yeah, that feels like such a long time ago now. But I think the enjoyment of it all, it must have begun in high school, really. Like I was always one of those students who loved geography, and sort of loved volcanoes. And I think it was a trip to Iceland that probably set me on the path. And so just, yeah, I loved all the geophysical hazards and found them so interesting, and ended up doing that at uni, and doing some studies. And my dissertation at uni was around the Sri Lankan the tsunami that happened in Indonesia.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
went to Sri Lanka, did some research, and then I ended up doing a master's in international development. There wasn't much disaster management masters at the time, so that was kind of the closest. And yeah, just was so interested in sort of disaster risk and reducing disaster risk. And took a while to get into the field. And some of the conversations we had in those early days really helped supporting, the vision and what to do and where to look and how to kind of move the career path onwards. But yeah, it was definitely some of those early trips, some early travel with family, nowhere too exotic, but just being out and around and seeing different places, different people. Just always found it super fascinating.
Brilliant. And I remember that when we met, you were trying to get into the sector and looking
Yeah,
for jobs. And I was
yeah,
also a member of Redar, a charity who trains people to work in disasters and relief work. And I remember at that time I think I became a mom or trying to become a mom.
yeah,
And I was giving you a lot of non-work related advice. And I think that's how we still kept in touch. We were talking about
yeah,
life more than disaster work.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, like
And
future planning.
yeah,
Yeah.
since then you have moved so far. I mean, you can be my boss now. Tell us what you do now.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But yeah, no, I've been so lucky. I mean, I feel like I had a slow burn in the first few years. I think, there was the global financial crisis, which never helped, and I was having all these bitty jobs. And I look back now and I see the value in every single job I had, even if it was in the sector or not. But I had quite a lot of like officer level kind of environmental or adjacent positions, and just got
In
to
the
learn
UK.
so much. Yeah, in the UK. And then it was quite fun because I worked for the environmental NGO in Wales, Keep Wales Tidy, which was wonderful. And then through that, I got in contact with Keep Australia Beautiful, the kind of sister agency. And I went out to Australia for a while and worked there for a bit, and just got to learn lots of different skills and lots of different kind of positions. And I used to drive around the outback of Australia by myself and just go and visit communities and schools and chat with people and just see what initiatives they were working on, and just all this amazing work that was happening at the community level, and it was just so wonderful. And I was really, really lucky to get that position. And I think, you know, you do kind of bitty jobs that you don't really think are going to lead anywhere, and then they just kind of appear into so many different things. So like I kind of ended up in Australia early on, in like 2012, I think. And then I came back to the UK, and I ended up being a project manager in Australia. And then I came back to the UK, couldn't find anything, and so I was like, right, back to square one, back to administrator level. And then so I started working at Save the Children as a grant administrator. And it was difficult, you know, to go from kind of being a project manager back to sort of administrator, from big environment and then into sort of development and humanitarian work. But again, it was such a great experience because I just got to learn all the kind of basics, the foundation, all work around kind of budgets and project planning and working with different country offices. It was just really, really great experience. So I did that for a couple of years, and I was really lucky to get a secondment in Save the Children as well, to the DRR team. Worked on one of their projects,
What
went
is
to
DRR?
Thailand. Oh, disaster risk reduction. So that was like my dream job at the time. So I was super lucky and I got a little bit more confident, you know, to ask for different things and see if different opportunities were available, because they weren't doing secondments at the time. And I just happened to sort of say, oh, you know, it's in the same office, you know, maybe it's possible. And yeah, I worked with the disaster risk reduction team for about 6 months and did some work with them, and then we held a conference in Thailand, and I was lucky enough to be able to go to that, and just slowly started to build different skills and things like that. Yeah, but yeah, and then all the life experience, then it just kind of starts to slowly take off, doesn't it, and take you places.
So you carried on staying in Australia after Save the Children?
No, so I was in Australia with Keep Australia Beautiful for about a year, and then I did a few other bits and pieces as well, because I was just on a like a working visa basically. And then I
Okay.
came back to the UK and worked with Save UK in London. So I moved to London, and I was there for about 5 years, I think, with Save,
Okay.
and slowly did a few different positions. And when I left Save, I kind of would have been working in a humanitarian kind of grant management team, and I got an opportunity, deployment. So I did a few deployments with that team to Ukraine, Zambia, Laos, and then my final one I thought was going back to Australia to do some school safety work, which I was really excited about. And then a few days before I was due to leave, I just looked at my ticket and I was like, Fiji? Why am I going to Fiji? I thought I was going to Australia to Save the Children Australia. But the program was being coordinated out at the Fiji office. So I didn't realize. So I got to
So
spend
you
3
didn't
months in
even
Fiji.
know that you're
I
going to
didn't know,
Fiji,
because it was a
and you
Save the
didn't.
Children Australia project. So I didn't even realize that it was actually going to be based in the region. So that was
I
a
thought
real
you're a good
pleasant surprise.
administrator.
Yep. Yeah, I know, right? See, this is what happens working on too many projects at once. You lose all the detail. So yeah, and it was funny because I'd been working on like mainly the Middle East, some of the child refugee crisis at the time. So I was totally ready for something like different. And I was like, yeah, Australia for a couple of months. That sounds good.
But
And
you
then, yeah,
just didn't
a few days
end up
before.
going there.
No, exactly. And because I knew the school safety project was for Fiji, for Solomon Islands, and for Vanuatu, but I didn't realize I was going to be, you know, able to be based there. So it was a real pleasant surprise. And then I got to Fiji, and I never looked back. It was just,
And the rest is
yeah,
history.
yeah, absolutely.
You can write a novel about your adventure. Yes, more adventure and more interesting and romantic stories are coming soon,
I
audience.
know all the real important stories.
Oh, yes. Tell us what happens after Fiji.
So
And
yeah, I got to
also, yes,
Fiji.
give us some glimpse about your personal life as well.
Yeah, well, this is where it all sort of kind of all came together, because I got
More
to Fiji
exciting.
and everything was just, I just loved it. You know, it was such a beautiful place. People are wonderful. And so I stayed there for a few months, and then I came back to the UK and I was like, no, sorry, can't do that. So I handed my notice in, and I just started looking for another position in the Pacific. And I'd made some contacts there while I was there, and applied for a job with Australian Red Cross, to support Fiji Red Cross with their TC Winston recovery after they had their Cat 5 tropical cyclone. And I was lucky enough for that to come through. And so moved back to Fiji and spent a year or so there. And then kind of back to the UK, all these kind of short-term contracts, tough, knowing that I wanted to be in the region. And then, eventually was working remotely, doing some consultancy for different kind of organizations of the Pacific and a bit more for Australian Red Cross, actually. And then finally got a bit more of a longer term position in Vanuatu with Save the Children again, actually. And just absolutely loved working in Vanuatu as well. Worked on their disaster ready program for, I think, nearly 2 years or so. And then that's where I met my husband. He started to work at Save the Children as well. He's a loggy, logistics, procurement. And so we just sort of started working together, and we had friends in common, and you know how it is. And then he was there for about a year, and then he left to go and work at government. And we were like, oh, we're not going to see each other anymore. He's from Vanuatu. Yeah.
But he was working for the Fiji government.
We were working in Vanuatu, yeah. So I was working for Save the Children Australia in Vanuatu, and so was he. So he was from there, and he was working with Save the Children, and he used to work for Red Cross and a few other places as well. So we worked together for about a year, and then he left to go work for Vanuatu government, just to like the Department of I think, which was it, Department of Public Works or something. And then we were like, oh, we're not going to see each other anymore. That's not good. And then the rest is history. So we stayed in Vanuatu for a little while, and then COVID, good old COVID happened, and I came back to the UK. Well, we were both due to come back to the UK and have our first, but he got stuck there and I got stuck in England. So I had my first, thank goodness for my parents, and they were super, super wonderful and helpful. So we stayed in the UK, and then we were apart for about 10 months. So we just got married in January 2020, and then I left in February 2020, and then we didn't see each other again then until December 2020. So my husband met our first baby when he was 6 months old, which was just crazy, really hard times, but we did so well. He was working, I picked up some consultancies from the UK for the Pacific again, which were just wonderful, again, opportunities, just kind of, keep us going and keep connected, and little things like that really like kept us going. And we just watched a lot of movies remotely together. that was our
he
savior.
Watched his baby from online, I guess.
Yeah. And it was wonderful because when we eventually got back to Vanuatu, we had to quarantine, and John was allowed to come and join us in quarantine. So that was great. And I had my interview for my current job the day I landed in Vanuatu. So it was all very, very chaotic. And, as these things happen, everything all has to happen on the same day. But we ended up spending a year in Vanuatu because of lockdown. In the Pacific was all very at different times to the kind of the rest of the world. It was all a lot later. So we kind of experienced COVID in the UK, and then a wave of COVID in Vanuatu, and then Fiji's borders closed, and it was all a bit chaotic. So we did well. We were very lucky.
Because I thought that all the Pacific Islands, New Zealand, they managed to contain because, they were island nations. So you did end up getting COVID in the Pacific Islands.
So they locked down.
What happened? How did they manage? Mm-hmm.
And they were, I think, because the borders were closed, it was kind of fine. But it's also like, when the borders are closed on a small island, you start getting a little bit of island fever. But we did super well, and it was wonderful, and everyone was like really trying to prepare and do super good work. And then the vaccine came, and so I think people started to kind of feel a little bit more confident. But then we had I can't remember the order in which things happened now, but we were supposed to move to Fiji for my current job. Then the borders closed for Fiji, so we stayed in Vanuatu. And then I got pregnant for the second baby in and amongst all of this time. So we have two kids. And then we were trying to leave Vanuatu, but we weren't able to come back. So we ended up going back to the UK for a year. And then kind of COVID started in Vanuatu. But people had the vaccine by this point. So it was quite a different situation, really. And then eventually when we were due then return back to the Pacific, we came to Fiji directly, and kind of things had kind of moved on a little bit and things were a little bit better by then. But yeah, it was interesting trying to work remotely from the UK for the Pacific time zones and everything, on kind of while being pregnant, and then have maternity leave and being totally out of it, and then moving back to the Pacific and kind of try to settle again in Fiji. Obviously I was lucky enough to have lived there before, so I knew people and things, but it was the first time for John and me to have the family there as well. So yeah, it was a good amount of adjustment.
It sounds like a washing machine being spun.
See, but you're working in disasters, you see, so you kind of get used to the chaos. Yeah, but I feel like everybody had a story for COVID, right? Like everybody went through something. And I was talking with someone the other day, and they moved about 4 times during COVID as well, from country to country, trying to kind of beat the lockdown and not being quite very successful each time. And yeah, it was difficult for people to kind of get through, I think, and recover now as well and feel settled.
Yes, touch wood so far.
Yeah.
And what about your parents? How did they manage to cope during COVID? Because you were not near them, because that was my fear all the time. And I did have to travel to Bangladesh to see my mom. She wasn't well.
Yeah, right. And that was it. Like, so when I left Vanuatu to go back to the UK to have our first, John was supposed to come a few months later, and then the borders closed. So I was already in the UK with my mum and dad. And then it was him I was worried about, because I knew like the healthcare system in the Pacific isn't often as, it's not the same quality as it is in the West. The services aren't there. And so I was really kind of concerned about, nobody knew what was going to happen right at the beginning.
Exactly.
Like, there was just no understanding or kind of concept of the gravity or the scale of things. So I was just really worried about what would happen if it went there, and in the UK it was just, the stories were so intense. So I was more worried about him because I was with my parents, but they were amazing. They just like took care of me and the baby like 100%, and were just so supportive, like, that emotional support you need when you're apart from your partner. And it was that was really, really tough for all of us, but it was also lovely. Got wonderful, got to spend time with them. They got 6 months with their grandson.
That's brilliant,
so it was
because
super good for us.
a lot of elderly people in this country were suffering from self-isolation. They couldn't hug their grandchildren or kids, which is so shocking. You see pictures of people, older people touching the glass,
the window.
It's just the glass window. It's just so sad.
Some of those stories, oh my gosh.
But you made your parents lucky.
Yeah, we were super, super lucky, and then totally heartbreaking when we left. But then we came back and we had the second, then we were with them for another year, and they've visited us a couple of times in Fiji already, and they love coming to visit. It's a long way for them, and they do amazing. Like, they're so incredibly, I don't know how they do it, the travel and everything, but they come and they stay with us, and it's just absolutely wonderful. We're so lucky, and we get to see John's family a lot, being so close in Vanuatu, so that's really lovely as well.
Speaking of travel, because you mentioned all these locations, and now you're in Tonga. Can you describe how long it takes to travel from the UK, and how do you travel? Do you need to go to Australia, New Zealand? How do you go through all these island nations?
So it's from the UK. When we traveled back with both our 2 kids, it was one of the most difficult journeys ever, because we went from like Manchester to Dubai, I think something like, maybe Australia to Fiji. There's a couple of different ways you can go, through Hong Kong and Singapore and stuff, or through Heathrow. You can even go via LA now. There's quite a few Fiji, America, Fiji, Canada connections.
Fiji is the biggest island.
Yeah, so Fiji is usually kind of considered as sort of the regional hub for a few different things, but and then to get around from here, it's like a couple of hours flights usually. So if we go to visit Vanuatu, it's about an hour and a half from Nandi in Fiji to visit John's family home. If I'm flying here to Tonga, it's only an hour and a half as well. But then if we try to get to sort of the maybe Marshall Islands, Micronesia, you have to go via Hawaii. I went to Cook Islands last year for the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat Leaders Meeting, and that's via New Zealand, and you cross the date line. So it's very confusing. You like lose a day and you gain a day, and it takes a day to get there, even though it's actually, if you were to do a direct flight to Cook Islands from Fiji, it's actually not that far, but there isn't one at the moment unless you charter a flight. So yeah, there's a lot of logistical complexities involved in when we visit a lot of the other island countries, and the regional role that I have now, I do a little bit of that travel.
So tell us about your current role. What are you doing now?
So I'm working with the International Federation of Red Cross. So we have a country cluster delegation based in the Pacific. So it's in Suva in Fiji. And we're around 40 staff now, I think. But we support 11 Red Cross national societies in the Pacific. And my role is a climate and resilience advisor. So supporting on kind of resilience building projects, looking at climate risks in the Pacific Island countries, and working with the national societies to try and kind of build their climate resiliency capacity to work with the communities that they serve, through and with government, other partners. And this week I'm here in Tonga working on some early warning for all work. So there's a new initiative that's come through in the last sort of 12 to 18 months called Early Warnings for All, where the UN Secretary General and the Federation of Red Cross and a few of the other UN agencies came together, and they're trying to ensure that the whole kind of world is covered by an early warning system by 2025, I think.
For tsunami, earthquake?
A multi-hazard.
Everything. Okay.
Multi-hazard.
So what are the hazards in the Pacifics?
So depending on where you are, we have everything. So when the World Risk Index was as it was before, Vanuatu always used to be kind of top or near top as the most at risk. But now they're kind of shifting and doing it by population. All of that's changed a little bit. But in terms of number of hazards and exposure, Vanuatu has been like one of the highest or the highest, basically because of volcanic risk, earthquake, tsunami risk, all being climate so risk. Exposed to climate, all of the climate risks, and the kind of, I guess the socioeconomic kind of exposure to those things as well, and the vulnerabilities that they face. But I mean, countries like Kiribati and Tuvalu in the North Pacific, Marshall Islands, the low-lying atoll nations, facing this concern about sea level rise on a daily basis. You know, we see even like seasonal storm surges that happen kind of normal, having this massive impact now because of coastal erosion and sea level rise, having this massive impact that they never saw before. So it's a huge concern, and we're just kind of working on a few different projects across the region to try and support the national societies to have the capacity to help the communities that they're working with and sort of steward funding. And a lot of my role for the first few years was just trying to kind of build awareness around climate change as a kind of a thing of its own, kind of, you know, not just resilience, not just geophysical hazards, not just kind of hazards on a kind of day-to-day basis, but this kind of long-term look at climate risks more kind of broadly, and try and support more planning for that, because obviously, you know, Red Cross can be a very reactive response agency. So trying to look at a bit more kind of from a 10 to 15 year time frame is quite a mindset shift in some ways. So just working on a few of those things in the last few years.
That's amazing. So how do you, because you've been in the Pacific for a while, so have you experienced any changes, you know, in terms of sea level rise and things like that? I mean, have you been experiencing any disasters yourself?
Yeah.
How many storms a year?
I'm doing quite lucky because of my in and out nature with having the kids and swapping from Vanuatu to Fiji. I've kind of missed all the big ones. So when TC Lola happened in Vanuatu, we were already in Fiji, and when there was one Lola. Big storm, tropical cyclone Lola. So that was last year, I think October 2023. It was a Cat 5. It was out of season cyclone, first one of the cyclone season, and it hit really badly just didn't kind of clip the northern islands of Vanuatu. But Vanuatu had already had Cat 5 and Cat 4 back-to-back cyclones earlier last year. So Tropical Cyclone Judy and Tropical Cyclone Kevin hit a week apart earlier last year. So they really had a lot of activity. And yeah, both times we weren't in the country, but I was supporting on the tropical cyclone Lola early stages of the response, because a lot of our team were actually in Vanuatu with the head of the IFRC, the Secretary General Jagan, was visiting the region, I think for the first time, and just so happened to experience a cyclone while he was doing a kind of visit to the National Society. So I was the lucky one in charge of the, the Suva office for a few days, trying to support a little bit on the early response stuff. So yeah, we have a lot of cyclones, and then when I was coming back from Cook Islands, again we were kind of clipped with tropical cyclone. I think it was Yasa or Anna, one of the two. And so I was grounded in Fiji for the night, so nothing too dramatic, but there was some good winds. There was some pretty good winds that night, and it definitely makes you think. And like even here now in Tonga, it's like such a flat country, and you can just imagine how people felt when the volcano erupted, and the tsunami happened, and the absolute kind of devastation that people were feeling, and there was no communication and things like that. It was just unbelievable. The volcano heard around the world, as it's now known. So yeah, there's a lot of awareness and a lot of kind of understanding about the risks here. And there's definitely a lot of change, like even talking to my husband's family and what they've seen in the last kind of 10 to 20 years in their communities. There's a lot of kind of coastal change for sure, and how things look a lot different. And sea level used to come here, and here that island used to be completely kind of exposed, and now it's totally covered, things like that. There's that kind of witness. You hear a lot of those stories in conversation now.
That's very interesting. Maybe you should write a diary about all the stories you hear from your
Yeah,
friends and
yeah.
family. And how about
And
the
they tell
children?
good stories. Oh,
How do they cope with all these volcanoes, cyclones, or is it just a normal thing for them?
I think it's a bit of both. Some of it's like it's where the kids grow up and they're used to it, but they're so vulnerable. They're so
Mm,
exposed, but then there's some really good programs here where there's a huge amount of education and focus on training kids and doing preparedness and building awareness about disaster risk reduction skills at the school level.
mhm.
And there's like school safety programs that are kind of very common, and
Mhm.
are very important. But at the
All
same time,
integrated.
it's
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. And we were having some conversations this week about, trying to make sure that we're connecting the school level education that sometimes the police force is responsible for, sometimes it's Ministry of Education, linking that with what's happening at the village level. So that might be the Ministry of Internal Affairs, or it might be different organizations working with communities here. We have the Tongan Council of Churches, we have Red Cross, we have Live and Learn, we have lots of different organizations all working together, and just seeing how we can connect and make sure that we have good continuity and consistency in messaging. And it's
Mm,
it's so important for kids, because their education gets disrupted, doesn't it, when we have these big events. Their schools get used as evacuation centers, and sometimes they
yeah.
get damaged in the process, and then they can't go back to school. And so a lot of this education continuity is so important, because as everybody saw through COVID, this 2 years of education that was kind of lost in some cases completely.
Mm,
And so trying to ensure that that's a priority, and making sure that like children aren't seen as vulnerable, but also, active participants in the community, and protecting them in the best possible way it takes a kind of a lot of different actors and players to work together a lot of the time. And I always think about my own kids as well now. I'm just like, what would they feel, what would they think, how would they experience certain things, and you have to make sure that they're at the heart of everything.
mm. I mean, speaking of the future, I mean, I hear that many of these islands will go underwater and Australia or New Zealand will need to host them. So tell us more, what will happen and what's the negotiation going on about all these climate justice and,
Yeah,
compensation?
yeah, so there's a lot of discussions, isn't there, at the moment, about loss and damage, and kind of what will happen. And I think there's a lot of kind of awareness about maybe the physical loss of assets, so island and land, and your home, your community. But I think what people are really kind of talking about now is this loss of identity, and kind of the cultural connection, and the traditional way, and the personhood, and how we can protect that. You know, it's land going under to a lot of people outside of the region, and it's like, okay, well, you know, the island's gone under, whatever. But for communities here, it's you know, traditional ceremonial burial sites, and it's the history of the people, and the culture, the heritage, and everything. So it's, you know, I think you could easily say from an outsider's perspective, oh, they've got the offer of going to Australia, great, that's lovely, great, we're lucky them, sort of thing. But actually, I think a lot of people don't see it in that way. Yes, obviously that you have to look at it in all different ways, but there's a lot of layers to the conversation. And one of the things we're working on at the moment is trying to just help, for example, the Red Cross national societies understand a little bit more of the role they could play, or the context that we're working in. So it's so complex, you know, there's the legal frameworks and there's the conversations, and there's, you know, kind of different laws and bills and policies and relocation settlements over here, and there's opportunities over there, and there's some good experiences where people in a way that's very, you know, highly dignified, and then there's other options and things that happen that maybe aren't necessarily of the will of the people, and, you know, some very, very different experiences across the region. And I think we just have to be so mindful of, you know, people-centered approach. You know, this is about people's lives, it's their history, their tradition, their culture, their heritage. You know, it's not just a piece of land. And a lot of that work is ongoing, and things are improving, and there's lots of conversations happening about that now. And I know it comes up a lot, and there's a wonderful speech that the Tuvalu, I think, Prime Minister made at COP a couple of years ago, when he was standing in the sea, and he was like, this used to not be in the sea, this is now sea level rise. I'm talking to you about sea level rise at this moment of, you know, very visual, poignant messaging. And I think things like that, it's trying to sort of make the awareness a little bit more broader than just, how the geography is looking, you know, which is just one part in the end.
That's really interesting because, you know, when we look at the mainstream humanitarian or development debate, it's all about damage and loss and, you know,
Yeah,
material
yeah,
compensation. But yeah, the
yeah,
human
yeah,
part, human side
absolutely.
of the story, it
Mm,
gets
mm.
lost. Mm,
Yeah, exactly, because you can't monetize it, really, can you? You can't really
exactly.
monetize heritage or traditional knowledge or culture. And so if you can't monetize it, then you can't really track it, maybe, or, you know, make it so that it's tangible enough to
Mm,
give some sort of strategy for, you know, protection, as it were. And that's the part. And, you know, for us, it's so difficult because, you know, we're having conversations about climate change with people who work and live there. You know, we're talking about,
yeah,
oh, you know, come and speak at this conference in such and such a place about climate change, and it's like, we try and provide a bit of protection to some of that, because, you know, this is people who live and work in that environment every single day. And it's, you know, there's a real balance to be had about bringing the voice of the region to the world in the right way, and then that sort of exploitative, you know,
yeah.
sometimes feels a little bit exploitative, in the way that those things can happen. And so we really try and look at the kind of the will and the desire of the community or the national society, for example, and try and
Exactly.
like look and see what the benefits are in that way. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that this is it. I remember I went to Maldives once for holiday when I was working in tsunami reconstruction. And then second time I went with Red Cross to evaluate all the work done after the tsunami. And that was a totally different experience. I stayed in a
Yeah.
really dirty house, someone's house, homestay. They didn't live, and, you know, it was full of cockroaches, but still,
Yeah.
I mean, total different experience. You know, the tourism and all these island looking fancy in the pictures, and then
Mm,
living in the reality, it was just, you know, amazing. And
mm,
then the land
yeah.
were reclaimed because, you know, everything is
Mm,
going underwater. They're reclaiming
mm,
land by dumping rubbish, and, you know, there is no
yeah.
waste management system. Those things
Yeah.
really breaks your heart when you see the
Yeah.
contrasting part of the story. And if you live in
Yeah.
these countries, it's really hard, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah.
It sounds
Absolutely.
fun that, oh, it's beautiful weather, tropical islands,
Ah,
but yeah, when
exactly.
you're you
Yeah.
know, dumped deep into the reality, it's a
Yeah.
different
Ah,
story.
absolutely. And you're working with people who, you know, live in different
Yeah,
communities and have different backgrounds and have different experiences. And I think it takes a lot to be very mindful of those things. And
yeah,
it's especially when you come from a place of such privilege, like we often do. and to have that understanding. And not even really, the more I work in this environment, the more I realize I don't know, it's like the more I'm just like, oh, there's another thing that I wasn't aware of, another dynamic I didn't really understand. And I think it's a privilege to get to see it and be a part of it, and support in the
And
ways that you can. But the more I kind of work in the space, the more I realize, yeah, it's you're barely a visitor, even if you live there. And I'm very lucky to have a lot of colleagues and friends who are from the region, and I feel very comfortable in the region and very welcome here. But still, there's a definite understanding of like, you'll only know so much.
and I like that you said you're barely a visitor, but you're a change maker.
Yeah,
That's why you're here today. You're not just a visitor; you are a change maker, and you blended in
we
two
try.
cultures.
Yes.
And how do you manage to keep yourself going? In the beginning, you mentioned that it's just going from here to there, and
Yeah.
it is quite hard to balance a
Mm,
humanitarian career as well as a family
mm,
and your
mm.
own sanity. How do you manage
Yeah.
to stay sane and be
Yeah.
sustainable for yourself?
I think a lot of it is, I mean, sometimes you can't and you don't, and you kind of just have to accept that there's days when you're just gonna not do that well. And that's okay. And then the rest of the time, I feel like the older I get, not that I get any wiser, but it's kind of more around like the daily care that you have to take of yourself, and before it'd be like, oh, I'll just work for like 6 months and take a holiday. But that started to not work,
Yeah,
quite quickly. You get just and the burnout
burnt out.
conversation that's happening at the moment, and has been for a long time. It's very real, and I think it's so much more so for parents, and people who care for other people, carers. And I don't know how. I was again chatting to a friend the other day who was doing the schooling and working during COVID thing, and I was like, man, that just, I can't even imagine, because my kids are small, and very, my eldest has got a lot of energy. He's like, he's puts a lot of energy into his day, as my mum says.
How old is he
And
now?
he's 4 now, and he's like every bit of 4, and it's amazing, it's wonderful, and it's just and it's a lot at exactly the same time. And then trying to have a very, very full on career, and you kind of have to balance it. And I never see myself as particularly ambitious or like career driven. I enjoy what I do and I like it, and I'd like to continue doing it, and I get a lot from it. And as long as I can keep doing it in some way, I'll be very happy. But it does give you different perspective, and you have to make different decisions when you have a family. And it's made me have to be a lot more kind of clear, direct about what I need. And
Mm,
that's to like my own family or employers, for example, because I definitely have, the
yeah.
the curse of the people pleaser, and I will just say yes and I will just do, and that doesn't serve anybody at the end of the day. And I think it's been a very good lesson learning around, daily care. And also there's so much to be said about being able to say no, and no in a constructive and helpful way, but being able to say no when you need to, has really served me very well. And I've never ever once been met with anything other than okay, fine, after I've said no to things, like ever. And that's your fear, is someone's going to be like, away with you, you're fired. But not once. It's either just been okay, we'll find someone else, or okay, maybe next week. That's been the extent of it. And I think when you realize you can say no to things, and you do not have to do everything, and that goes for every part of life. Finding the right support system, asking for help, saying what you need, have been really important kind of learnings for me since we had family. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I guess that is your Mars mantra, or you have anything extra to add?
Yeah, I think that's it. I was thinking about this, and I was like, I think it's this. You can't leave your care till somewhere else down the road. You have to do the
Look
daily
after
kind of
yourself.
commitment.
Hmm.
It can be tiny things, and it should be tiny things. A glass of water, 10 minutes in the sun, cup of tea in peace, read a book for 5 minutes, whatever. But you have to do it every day. Can't let that build up. of days and days and days where you've done nothing for yourself to maintain, take care, look after, because it just doesn't work. And the more you can do, in the week or the month as well, the better. So yeah, I think that's maybe that's it.
I think maybe that's why we both gelled so well, because I remember when we met, I was on my maternity leave, and I gave you all these words
Yeah.
of wisdom, and now you're giving it back to me in my
No, I know.
Mantra
Now it's
podcast.
like 10 years later and we can revert it. Yeah, I remember so well. And we were talking about work-life balance, weren't we? And, how having kids and trying to get the timing right. It's such a challenge. You're at the peak of your career and you're doing so well, but the family thing happens, and you can never really control those things, but you have to make sure that you're looking after yourself and thinking about what it is you really want. And if you do have to sacrifice things sometimes, that's okay, as long as you're doing that and it's an open conversation with the people you need it to be. It makes it a lot easier.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jen. Is there anything
Thanks,
else?
Rumana. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
All
Lovely
good.
to meet you.
I know. So nice to see you after so long. Hopefully one of these days we'll end up crossing paths at some point.
Or we'll go on a holiday together.
Yeah, that sounds lovely.
Hopefully
A
my
spa.
Mars Mantra book launch or something.
Yes. Oh my God, amazing. Find us a nice spa. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a lovely sleep.
I will. Have a great day.